We're talking more about perception here. This is page 201. And where your perceptions come from, what you're born with, what you learn. You are born with the ability to distinguish human voice, to tell salt from sweet, to startle to a loud noise, to turn your head toward a sound source. The Babinski reflex is a foot reflex. Somebody rubs the bottom of your foot.
I'll just say it right now.
So these are all things that you can perceive when you're a baby, when you're first born. You don't have to learn them. So you obviously have some of your perception pre-programmed, what you can perceive. Babies discriminate size, color, contrast, shadow, and patterns. You can do this at a very young age. Now, your senses don't develop. They aren't all developed at once. When you were first born, your eyes could not make out the crisp images that you're seeing now. Things were relatively unfocused, and you had to learn how to focus your eyes. You had to learn how to do that. There are muscles that control focusing your eyes. And just through random action, you happen to tense one of those muscles, and it focuses your eye a bit, and you can see a little clearer, and you remember, wait a second. Your mind goes, I just activated that muscle, and now I can see a little clearer. So it does it again, and you can see a little clearer, and so you learn how to focus. And you learn how to discriminate between colors and such. A lot of this is learned behavior. How do we know what babies can and can't do, since they can't talk to us? Well, here's one old test that kind of shows how this works. This is a famous one. It's called the visual cliff, designed by Eleanor Gibson and Richard Walk. And it's to test depth perception. What they did was they had a glass surface. You can see it over here on the right. And there was a checkerboard pattern. The checkerboard pattern gave the child the ability to see what's through the glass surface. The checkerboard pattern comes all the way up to the glass on one side of the table, and then there's a drop where the checkerboard pattern is way down on the other side of the table. So this glass table has, in effect, a shallow side and a deep side. And then they set the baby on the table. They actually made here it shows they have a white surface where they set the baby. And there's the deep side, and there's the shallow side. And then they see what the baby will do. And the baby, under a certain age, can't perceive the depth and would crawl over this side. But once they reach a certain age, they can see the depth. Actually, they can't even crawl. What they do is they put heart monitors on the baby. Even before they can crawl, they can test this. And if they set the baby on the deep side, under a certain age, nothing would change under the heart monitors. But over a certain age, and I don't know what it is, I think it says it in the reading, it's like a couple of months. When they're a couple of months, they can perceive the depth. All of a sudden, the heart will beat faster if you put them on the deep side versus the shallow side. And if you get a crawling baby and you set him in the middle, the baby won't crawl over this side, but he will crawl over this side. And what they would do is they'd set the baby in the middle, and the mother would go to the opposite side and call for the baby. And he wouldn't crawl across it to the mother if the mother was on this side, but he would crawl across it to the mother if the mother was on the other side. So that's a way of telling that the babies can perceive the depth. And by checking the heart rate, they can tell at what age they can perceive that depth. Even though they can't talk. Isn't that an interesting experiment? I thought I had video. Yes, I have video footage from it.
Top right.
Yeah. babies show increased attention over the deep side at age 2 months, but aren't afraid until about the age they can crawl. When they crawl, they learn that they can fall if they crawl over an edge. This is original footage. I don't even know if it has any sound of the original experiments.
Pretty big baby.
It does have sound.
As soon as the baby can move about, he can be observed in the same way as other animals. This is what the baby sees when he is placed on the center platform and looks at the far side. His mother stands opposite him, twirling a toy and beckoning to him. 36 babies, 6.5 to 14 months old, were placed in the center like this one and watched while their mothers stood for 2 two-minute periods on each side. Here is another baby who has just been placed on the board. Almost all of the babies went to their mothers at the near side, as this one is doing. This baby, too, is going to his mother on the near side. But when the mother stood at the far side, nearly all the babies refused to go to her, like this one.
He's not going.
Wait, is it all? So can we see one where they actually do try to do it?
But I don't have that.
Oh darn.
And you can do that. These sorts of experiments you can do with animals, and we have a section later in our book about animal psychology. So they do this with animals too, to see if they can see death, and if they'll do the same thing. So that's a famous experiment. Scientists have found that there are critical periods in your development. A critical period is a time period, it's kind of a window where the perception starts to develop and finishes developing. And the organism must be able to develop in that critical period. Critical period seen in kittens for the development of perception of vertical or horizontal lines. What they did was they ran cats around, and there is a time period when a kitten develops a perception of vertical lines and a perception of horizontal lines. And if the kitten is kept blind during that time period of development, they're never able to see vertical or horizontal lines. For instance, they would run into a tabletop that was at head height if they never developed the ability to see horizontal lines. Or might run into a table leg if they never developed the ability to see vertical lines. And it'll never develop in them after the critical period. Or it'll never develop in them perfectly if they try to learn after the critical period. Blind or deaf people from birth never fully adjust if their handicap is later restored. You can restore somebody's sight through fixing whatever problem they had. That can be done in some people who are born blind or born deaf. But if they miss that critical period where they're need to learn how to focus their eyes and such, they never are able to fully do it. So the point of all this is that perception is dependent on both biology, what you're born with, and experience, what you learn. We're back to the nature-nurture thing. Both are involved in seeing and hearing and perceiving the world. If you need something, you're likely to perceive it. Hungry people were faster to identify words having to do with food. Here's an interesting experiment you could do. Test people and say, I got words coming up on a computer, and you hit the keyboard as fast as you can, you hit the space bar as fast as you can when you see a word that has to do with food. And so the word flashes up, and the computer is timing how long it takes them to hit the space bar. It's a pretty simple program to build. And if you measure them before lunch, they do it a lot faster than if you measure them after lunch. Isn't that cool? You perceive better based on what you need. Beliefs. You are more likely to experience something if it is consistent with your beliefs. See that? It's a sweet roll. It's a cinnamon roll or something like that.
Oh.
Notice anything about it?
Looks like a face with the hood on.
It looks like Mother Teresa. That's the Mother Teresa cinnamon roll that's so famous.
Wait, there's a famous Mother Teresa.
Yes, people come from journeys of hundreds of miles on foot to see the Mother Teresa cinnamon roll. I'm not making this up. That somebody found in their morning breakfast that was served.
Wait, how do they preserve it?
I don't know. Looks like it's in some kind of box.
Probably.
They make millions off of this. How about that? I showed you that at the beginning of the year.
That
The
actually
face
does-
of the smoke on the 9/11 towers. And they asked people, what they did was they show them these things first, several things like this. And they show it to them and they say, you see anything crazy about it? And people who tend to believe in superstition and ghosts or in something like that, more often see the face in the clouds, in the smoke. And people who don't tend to believe in that stuff tend not to see that. And what you do is you show them these pictures, and they answer, and you write down their answers, and then to make it a double-blind study, they go to somebody else, and somebody else asks them, do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in this? And they fill out, or maybe they can just do a survey, and then you match up their responses with their answers on the survey. And you can figure out that your beliefs have an influence on what you see, on your perception. People who are very religious tended to see the Mother Teresa cinnamon roll more than people who didn't. Oops, what were the other things? Emotions. Your emotions affect your perception. Pain is more pronounced if you're depressed than if you're happy. Depressed people tend to notice pain more. A child afraid of the dark is likely to see a ghost versus one who is not afraid of the dark. So your emotions, fear can play a part in what you're seeing. Pain can play a part, or depression can play a part in what you're feeling. Expectations, previous experience affect how we perceive the world. A perceptual set is the tendency to perceive what you expect to perceive. I got a little activity for you. No, never mind. I don't have an issue. We'll do it later. There's a later chapter. Your culture. What culture you live in affects what you perceive. we all see this line looking longer than that line, even though, since we've seen this illusion before, we know that they're the same. That's because we live in a world with rooms. And I already explained to you, that shape right there usually means it's a corner of a room or a box or a building that's jutting out at us. And so your brain says that must be closer. And if you see this configuration of lines, that must be the corner of a room or a box that's farther away. And so your brain makes it seem bigger. Since it's far away and you're seeing it, it must be big. So your brain changes around what you see. And this is based on your culture. Because if you live in a culture that doesn't live in rooms and boxes, like the Bushmen in Africa, that never see boxes or rooms, this doesn't work on them. They don't see that line looking any longer than that line. Which is amazing to me.
What if everyone built houses that are round?
Then they wouldn't see it either. It wouldn't affect them.
How about like a tent or something?
A tent?
Yeah.
Well, if it has this series of lines, then it would work on them. And if
They
it
live
doesn't,
in igloos.
I don't know. You need to go test the people who live in igloos. Most people are around boxes and square things a lot, so it works on them. We do the subliminal stuff next time. We'll talk about this next time. Okay, so you read. It's a short reading section tonight. It's 201 to 204. 3 pages. That's not too much to ask, is it? Is that too much to ask? 3 pages?
Yes.
We're continuing with our, what do they call the folks that sense 2 things at once?